everyone, welcome to Out of the Box Physical Therapy. Today I'm going to be talking about a hot topic in the profession of physical therapy. I'm frustrated that it even is a hot topic, but it is, and I think we really need to talk about it. I made this video to break down the reasons why it has become such a taboo for doctors of physical therapy to introduce themselves as doctors of physical therapy. I want to break down the reasons why it has become such a taboo in our profession, and I also want to talk about the importance of breaking out of this particular box. Let's do a little bit of history of the profession of physical therapy. Physical therapists have not always been doctors. There is actually a very long history and a relatively fast progressing one in the way physical therapy has evolved. I'm going to break it down just real briefly for you. In the very early 1900s, people actually just had a certificate in physical therapy. Later on, you had to get a bachelor's of science in another field with a certificate in physical therapy. We then eventually progressed to having to have a bachelor's of science in physical therapy. And by 1980, master's programs began to be developed, which eventually evolved into the doctorate level program starting in 1997. And by the year 2015, which really wasn't that long ago, all physical therapy programs had transitioned to the doctorate level. So why did this evolution occur? Because it needed to. It really, really needed to. Physical therapy is an incredible profession. I mean, we have the ability to truly make a really great impact on patients' lives. And the healthcare world began to recognize that. They began to see how we could help patients get better, decrease pain, increase independence for patients. And this ultimately led to reductions in the need of imaging, pain medications, or other medications, and also reduced the need of surgeries. This ultimately causes a reduction in overall healthcare costs. And that's a really valuable thing that the healthcare is really trying to latch onto right now. How can we reduce healthcare costs? It's really important to note that a lot of physical therapists actually worked very hard for our profession to be recognized as something worth valuing and to be seen as an alternative form of treatment for patients for a lot of different things going on with their body. This was really exciting. But as we came into the spotlight, we realized that we really needed to prove what we did worked. There honestly wasn't very much research at all happening for physical therapy until like the 70s or 80s. And that trend gradually began to grow, and for a really good reason. With research, we really have found how certain types of treatments that used to be very commonplace in physical therapy really were not effective at all. And through research, we began to realize what truly is effective and what truly is valuable to a patient. Physical therapy used to actually be very modality-based and very passive. In fact, did you know that physical therapy didn't used to be a profession at all? It used to be a treatment, a commodity, a thing that somebody did. But now we are a profession. We are still fighting those old perceptions of what physical therapy is. The push in our profession is to have someone such as a primary care physician not write a prescription for physical therapy, but instead write a referral to a physical therapist. See the difference? That is the difference between a thing that is prescribed and a profession. Physical therapists began taking the initiative to grow. They knew our profession couldn't stay the same any longer, and that we really needed to up our game to begin being respected in the healthcare world. This is what caused the ultimate evolution of our profession to a master's program. We knew we needed to learn more about anatomy and biomechanics and movement and so much more to be able to truly provide the best quality care to our patients, something that went beyond just a treatment, but pointed more towards a profession. We also saw the big value and the need in teaching physical therapists how to both read research and understand it and to also produce it. And we didn't stop at the master's level. We kept going. We went to the doctorate level. We have been pushing to have patients be able to have direct access to us as a physical therapist. We can't be trusted with that kind of direct care without the ability to see how our patient needs to be treated elsewhere. We had to be educated on how to catch red flags, to send them elsewhere in case something came up during their stay with us that was absolutely out of our scope of practice. That's ultimately what the doctoral profession is for. Create autonomy, but live up to that autonomy and do it professionally, and to ultimately keep the patient safe above all else as you have direct care of them. And beyond that point, the doctorate level also pushed for a level of respect that our profession has always had a difficulty in attaining. Having a doctorate in physical therapy does help push insurance companies to respect us enough to reimburse our services. And it also helps push other healthcare professionals to view us with a level of respect as well that we've been fighting to attain. There is still a lot of growth needed in this area when it comes to having respect from insurance companies and having respect from other healthcare professionals. But the growth is indeed happening, and I think it's really important that we be behind that movement to be respected more in the healthcare field. There actually is a long history of physical therapists being pretty uncomfortable with the profession moving to a doctoral level. There's a lot of reasons for that, but I'm hoping all the reasons I stated above pretty much shows why the evolution is important and why it's even necessary. There are physical therapists who have truly fought very hard to get our profession to where it is at. And, the bar has been risen, and I really think that we need to rise to that challenge. And all of this pretty much leads right into the hot topic. Everyone who's graduating as a physical therapist by this point in time are graduating from a doctoral program. You're graduating as a doctor of physical therapy. I mean, even according to the APTA, you have the legal right to put doctor in front of your name because of your academic degree. When it comes to how we introduce ourselves to our patients, there actually are some pretty tricky rules out there based on the jurisdiction that you're in that may monitor or regulate that a little bit differently. But in many states, we do have the legal right to introduce ourselves to our patients as doctors of physical therapy. There are some restrictions on just calling ourselves a doctor to our patients, but in many states, again, you can call yourself a doctor of physical therapy in front of your patients. Just be sure you check out the jurisdiction that you're in to make sure that you're being safe and doing things legally. But back to the main point. In many states, you can call yourself a doctor of physical therapy, and yet a lot of us don't. And even worse than that, a lot of us are kind of ashamed to do that. And even worse than that, I've heard physical therapists say that they're not real doctors. Yeah? What's going on? I was really frustrated when I saw this happening in our profession, and I feel like I didn't really see it as much, of course, until I was practicing. I want to touch on some of the more personal reasons why a lot of physical therapists seem to be making the decision to not call themselves a doctor of physical therapy. Like I said, there's a long history and a lot more that could be talked about in terms of older generations of physical therapists not being comfortable with evolution. But I mainly want to talk about the reasons why people now are still doing it. Like, why are people in my generation having a tough time calling ourselves doctors of physical therapy? And as I touch on each reason, I also want to provide a counter argument as to why I feel like we could be doing a little bit better. Here is excuse number one that I often hear from physical therapists, particularly doctors of physical therapy, I should say, as to why they're uncomfortable calling themselves a doctor of physical therapy. Some patients have had bad experiences with doctors, and I don't want the patients to think that way about me if I were to call myself a doctor. I also want to be fun and approachable. So how about you be the first doctor that gave them a great experience? I mean, think about it. Why is it that some patients have felt really irritated at physicians or other kinds of doctors. It's because they don't feel heard. So make them feel heard. Listen to them. Take time to really hear their story, what's been going on in their life, why they're there, why they want to get better, what their goals are. Be that person for them. That's something really unique that I feel like the profession of physical therapy offers our patients. We spend a lot of time with them. I know I've had a lot of my patients comment on how thankful they were to have been heard by me, and that they feel I truly made a plan of care to meet their needs. And I know that's something that a lot of you have found as well. Like, patients are really thankful for what we offer them, and they're really thankful to feel like someone's really addressing their needs. You don't have to ditch your title and dumb yourself down to be respected by your patients. They're going to respect you for the way you treat and listen to them. I personally have never had a patient run out of the clinic because I called myself a doctor of physical therapy. In fact, I have seen respect increase by patients knowing that I am not just any doctor, but I am a doctor who will listen to them. And better yet, I'm a doctor of physical therapy. So there's a score for your profession. You could be that first doctor in their life that really gave them a great experience, and they're going to remember you as their physical therapist. Also, how many of you have gotten those very frustrating comments from patients or questions when they say, so how long did it take you to get your certificate in physical therapy? Or how many months did it take you to become a physical therapist? I think all of us have heard that, and it's really frustrating to hear that when you've spent so much time really learning how to be a physical therapist and how to take care of patients. But you can't really be all that annoyed when you never take the time to share your title with a patient and let them know the level of expertise that you have to offer them. Give some space for your patients to be educated on your level of education. It's not going to run them off. It increases respect. I can personally say that I've hardly gotten any more of those frustrating comments or questions since I started introducing myself as a doctor of physical therapy to my patients on day one. So even though that fear is there for you, I really don't think that it is a rational fear to have. I really do believe that it's not a good enough reason to step away from sharing your title with a patient. Another comment I've heard a lot, and that I've even felt some myself, is the following. No one else in my clinic uses the title Doctor of Physical Therapy, so I feel really uncomfortable doing that. I'm not really sure where everyone stands. I hear you there. I felt the same way during my first job as a PT. I was actually going into it feeling pretty comfortable and wanting to call myself a doctor of physical therapy, but I noticed right away that my colleagues didn't really seem to be doing the same thing. And it made me uncomfortable. It made me feel like, am I going to be the only one that's doing that? And is that okay? Will I be looked at as being, uppity and snobby and throwing my title around? I really didn't know how to approach that discomfort I was feeling with using the title Doctor of Physical Therapy. And I actually do think it's really important to give respect to colleagues and supervisors who may have differing opinions on this topic. I also think it's a good idea to bring up any of these concerns to your superior so that you can really know where the clinic stands. I actually did talk to my supervisor about it, and in short, she didn't have an issue with me using my title. And in the state where I practice, there isn't any restriction on the way I use the title Doctor of Physical Therapy. So once I did some research and I asked my questions, I decided that from then on, I was going to make the decision to introduce myself as Dr. Walkup, physical therapist, to my patients day one when I was doing their evaluations. And I quickly followed this up with, but you can call me Mel. This ended up working out really well for me because I was able to show my patients or share with my patients that I was a doctor of physical therapy on day one, but it also made me feel comfortable that I wasn't going to be the only physical therapist having their patients call her doctor all the time. Oftentimes a patient will even ask me more about my level of education, and sometimes it is one of surprise, like, oh, I didn't know that physical therapists were doctors, or oh, I didn't know that there was even such thing as a doctor of physical therapy, or oh, I thought that it only required a certificate to be a physical therapist. And based on what I talked about before, as you see, like that used to be what it was in the physical therapy profession. It used to be not even really a profession. It was a thing that you did. And so that actually has allowed some space for me to just briefly educate my patients on where the profession has come to, even if it's as brief as, yeah, a lot has changed in the profession, but all the programs are at the doctoral level now. And it's just a very brief education to our patients on where we are as physical therapists. And I actually really enjoy being able to educate our patients on that, and I think it's a really important thing for our patients to know. Also, in order to help fight some of these misconceptions of the term doctor, we need to be willing to not use the language inappropriately. A lot of patients always say, just use the word doctor to refer to like pretty much any kind of medical doctor. And I think it's important for us to switch the language a little bit, and when we're asking them about different kinds of doctors and the discussions they've had with them, that we should use phrases like primary care physician. What did your primary care physician say? What did your neurologist say about this? What did the orthopedist say about your MRI? It kind of helps reorient the patient to who they're talking about. Like, just using the word doctor doesn't really specifically tell you anything about who they're referring to. So I think it's important that we change our language a little bit with how we even talk about it with patients. I want every patient of mine to leave the clinic having had a really positive experience with physical therapy. And I want them to leave knowing that they had a doctor of physical therapy who took really good care of them. So again, don't be afraid to call yourself a doctor of physical therapy just because no one else does in the clinic. But I do think it's important to talk to your superior about where the clinic stands on it, just to make sure you're being safe and that you're not going to get into any trouble. And again, check the laws in your state to see how you're allowed to use the term doctor of physical therapy with your patients. Another common concern I've seen come up, and I think it's a really important one to talk about, is the following comment. My supervisor has his or her master's in physical therapy, and I don't want to come across as being demeaning by calling myself a doctor when my superior, who has way more experience and knowledge than me in so many areas, can't do the same thing. I definitely want to say I will never encourage any kind of belittling of physical therapists who don't have their doctorate, because they do have a lot of super valuable experience that we have a lot to learn from, and that I absolutely have learned a lot from as well. You should absolutely respect all levels of education within the profession of physical therapy. However, you are worthy of being respected as well. You worked really hard to get your doctorate in physical therapy, and you have every right to use that title. You shouldn't feel ashamed to. People in your clinic aren't technically allowed to keep you from using the term doctor or phrase doctor of physical therapy in your clinic. To me, a superior or a clinic who tries to hold you back from using your title and your education and calling yourself a doctor of physical therapy is disrespecting you, and they're disrespecting the profession and where we're trying to go. They're also disrespecting the level of education that you do have. I don't believe that it's meaningful or helpful for a clinic to have everyone be looked at from the lowest level of education rather than as they are. That is lowering the bar. It's not raising it. Going forward, I really think it's important that we raise each other up in the profession of physical therapy. Regardless of whether you have your bachelor's of science in physical therapy, you have your master's in physical therapy, or you have your doctorate in physical therapy, we all really need to stand together and help push our profession in the direction that's ultimately going to allow us to care for our patients better. We need to push each other towards dignity and respect for each other, and the route that got us here to begin with. I believe that for a long time our profession was so at odds with all the different kinds of doctors that were out there that many are still really bitter towards the term doctor. But we are in a new age now. We are now in an age where physical therapists are doctors too, and we are called to rise to everything that title means. Be an approachable, listening, kind, friendly, professional doctor of physical therapy who has every intention to optimize your patient care and rapport. Whether you have all of your patients call you doctor from day one, or you just introduce yourself as a doctor of physical therapy on that first day with the permission to call you by your first name from now on, call yourself a doctor of physical therapy if you do indeed have a doctorate in physical therapy. But again, do it legally. So this is a shout out to all my DPTs. Let's break out of this box. Let's keep raising the bar. Let's keep pushing our profession forward to be the best that we can be. See y'all next time.